cheap dates. So, for whatever reason, you can either be already partnered up or in the pursuit of trying to be partnered up. Or you could just be, I guess, unknowingly partnering everybody up at the same time, I guess. I'm being a little humorous here. But what I'm talking about is going out on cheap dates and how it's applicable to any sort of definitive relationship that's been established between people. And so that's all. And I'm also a little hyper, but there's also always that. And anyways, I do want to talk about how sometimes cheap dates can be fun, and more importantly than that, what are some cheap dates, right? And so let's start with a date, okay? And then let's talk about cheap dates. So a date is, when you go out with somebody, right? Now, ideally, we all want to be treated like royalty, right? Like in terms of we go out on a date, the expectation for the man from a straight hetero perspective that I've got, right, is that, you want to go somewhere halfway nice, which means some money, a lot more money than normal, in terms of setting that standard for wanting to be appropriate in that situation. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, because I want to keep it short and actually get to cheap dates, but dating, I'd say that from my perspective, is always kind of like this. I hope that, the woman isn't going to want to go somewhere super, super fancy. And most of the time it's not because even for example, I can't stretch for it or find a way how to pay for it or whatever, but just because I feel like it's symbolic of how that woman wants her lifestyle to be. And so I am not the guy that's taking the woman out on a fancy date or whatever at first, I'd say. And but it's all circumstantial, right? Because I have before, so I guess it just depends on what's going on at that particular time in your life. But this is in fact dating, okay? So cheap dates are dates that literally just don't cost a lot of money. They don't have to be cheap in that it's like a cheap experience, you feel me? No, there's quality where there can lack quality sometimes, or quantity. There's quality where quantity lacks sometimes with dating, because you'd assume that the person that you're with isn't always going to expect and or demand the absolute best. Now, if that's the case and those standards are set and either one of you in that role are able to provide that, then better for you. I'm just, from a lay perspective, not everyone is super rich or, so it's important to sort of bring it down a notch and talk about how cheap dates, I guess, are what rich people would call not their experience of a fancy dinner and a high-end experience to constitute as a date, right? So cheap dates. Let's talk about what kinds of cheap dates there are now, right? Now that we've gone through dating a little bit, cheap dating, as it would be, which I feel again, is sort of counter to what it means, because sometimes I'd even argue that cheap dates are the best dates because they require a lot more thought. Just like any working class person will tell you ever, and I'm sure a few of the upper class too, right? But it's a luxury to say it at that point. I really appreciate thoughtful gifts, and it's weird because I've been in relationships where a handful of women have also been the same way, legit, the same way, which was 3/4 of the reason why I liked them the whole time anyway, was because they would make me stuff, for my birthday or for an anniversary, and I actually dig that. I actually do. I come from a family where, my mom and my grandmas and my great aunts, everybody, that was kind of their thing, by choice, they handmade items from blankets to blasted, furnace blasted pottery or clay and stuff, and so, I like that kind of stuff. So again, cheap dates don't always have to mean bad dates or just not spending any money. It could also mean taking a hike, which is, the whole point of a date is to spend time with somebody, right? And not necessarily do you need to be spending money the entire time you're spending time together. And if that's the case, then that's a kind of dating, sure, right? But as far as cheap dates go, those are some ideas. You can also, you know, instead of spending $200 out to eat, you could spend that same amount on like good quality ingredients and make something together at the crib, you feel me? And like that's probably been the most enjoyable intimate experience I've had with a woman ever is like cooking with them, like legit, like no, like just like cooking, you know what I mean? Because you're next to each other, you're talking, and you're creating something that you're both going to eat. So like you both halfway kind of care about it or don't. It could be silly, it could be serious. So there are lots of cheap dates, and again, it's important, I would say, because of the kind of like relationship that I'm looking for from my perspective, that cheap dates are like not only applicable but like kind of the thing, because you know, life is life, and I guess like when you're with somebody, every day is sort of like a date, you feel me? Like it doesn't have to be any different than the other in terms of just the exclusivity of being within the confines of that relationship. And so I am for thoughtful, I guess, which could be said or used as cheap dates. But again, to say that I don't also fancy a $200 meal, you know what I mean, is like silly, because I do, right? Who doesn't? But I definitely say, and I absolutely mean this, that I'd much more rather have anything and everything else and just that time and just chilling with that person and spending that money on other things that we could get a whole lot more of, and make that time even last longer than I would if I had just the choice of either of the two going down at that particular time. You know what I mean? So cheap dates, it's Friday, and if you've been with somebody for a long time, or you know what I mean, you're interested in seeing what somebody's like on a date, definitely consider doing some of these things, and even just like talking about cheap dates.